everyone, welcome back to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana, and today I am taking you through a video of Speedball Experiment. This is with my Speedball gel plate and some Speedball acrylic inks. These are the types of inks you want to be using on this type of gel plate, not acrylic. I will do a little bit of experimenting today, but mostly I'm going to be sticking with these. One thing to note is this gel plate by Speedball is smaller and more lightweight, and the idea behind this plate is it's supposed to be really good with getting detailed impressions. You do have to do a thin layer of paint in order to do that. So what I'm experimenting with today is to see how the paints will layer on top of each other. One thing I did notice as I was doing this is that the paints take a little bit longer to dry than acrylic. So I did have to use a fan to dry my paint in between. For this print, I am working on getting kind of a grungy design in the back, or the foreground, I guess, of this print. I like doing the grungy, and I really didn't know how it was going to work with this gel plate. I'm also using a stencil that has some really nice fine lettering, and I always have to put my lettering backwards on the gel plate. I just wanted to see how my print would turn out with this fine detail of a print, since this gel plate is supposed to be doing well with details. I only have this 4-inch brayer that works with the Speedball paints, so it was a little tricky getting the little areas without going over to the area that I don't have tape. Plus, it wasn't getting in between until I pressed down nice and firmly, and then the paint was getting in between on the lettering. I wasn't thinking about this when I taped down my stencil, but the tape did remove the paint on that first layer, so just keep that in mind if you're taping down a stencil. I didn't have any white in this Speedball paint, so I am working with just color today, color and black and gold. And I wanted to, for this print, I wanted it to have a kind of like a barn door, because it's called Farmer's Market. Just something kind of purpley red. So I put down some blue first, and then I'm going to go over the back of the blue with some red. And I did wait for the gold layer to dry and then the blue layer to dry, and then I came in with the red over the top. To give it that kind of a rustic barn door look, I just used a piece of corrugated cardboard and just pressed that down just to give it some texture and some lines. And then I let this layer dry, and since I didn't have any white in the Speedball paint inks, I decided to try acrylic paint just on the last layer to see if I could pull a print with the acrylic paint if it was just the last layer, not the layer touching the gel plate. I'm using this mixed media journal that I have, little art journal page that I'm going to do. And I let this set to dry for probably about 20 minutes. I really wanted to see if it was going to work. I would say it worked okay. It wasn't obviously a perfect print. It does capture some of that grunginess, and then the white does show through because the paint didn't all pull up, or the ink didn't all pull up from the gel plate. So since there was some ink left over, I thought I would just use that as the start of my next gel print. And here I'm coming in with some brighter, more fun colors. These inks tend to become lumpy like this. I don't know how to get rid of the lumpiness. Maybe I have to massage the containers. They're they're not shakeable bottles, so I did try shaking them anyway, but they don't seem to, I don't know, get rid of that lumpiness until you just sprayer it out. I have some packaging here and then a tissue paper that I used to remove some of that design. Then I brought some bright colors over the other two bright colors. This time I'm bringing in a yellow with the pink. This is just a texture I created with my score tool. I just made lines across the page. And then a jar, a mason jar, to make some circles. Once again, I let this layer dry, and then I put some green, a very bright, almost like a lime green color down. And I'm going to use this green to pull up this print. While this print is drying, I'm going to bring my journal, my art journal, back over the page I was working on. I couldn't really see the words, so I thought I would just try to put some acrylic paint over that stencil to see if I can see the words a little bit better. This is just some chalk paint in fog gray and a makeup sponge that I got from Dollar Tree. I can definitely see the words a lot better with the paint over the gold area. For just a little bit more emphasis, I did use a black acrylic marker to give a shadow to the words. And I think that's much more visible and you can actually read it. Back to the gel print, which is dry now. So this was interesting. It wasn't exactly how I expected it to turn out. It wasn't bad. Wasn't exactly what I was expecting. It does have some of that red and purple in the very foreground from the previous print. Now I wanted to just focus on the bright colors because I really did like how those bright colors were starting to look on that other print. Using the mesh again and a tissue paper. The tissue paper helps remove some of the ink so that it reveals some of the design. I noticed that as I was spraying out the colors, there were some areas being pulled away. I don't know if that's because the paint underneath was not quite dry enough, but that's what I'm thinking had happened. I'm making some more circles. And this time I have the grid side of this little corrugated piece of cardboard. And it's just tape, drywall tape that I taped on the back side. This is a clay texture. And I let this layer dry. And to let it dry, I leave it for about 10 minutes with a fan on it. Don't know if that's long enough when the paint starts peeling up, but for this layer it seemed to be working pretty good for the two colors I put over the top. As I lifted this print, I realized half of the paint was still on the gel plate. Now, I didn't use a placement tool or anything to line up this print, but I thought I would eyeball it and see, because the ink was still very wet on the paper and on the gel plate. So I thought if I put this down right over the top, there's a possibility that it would dry with the rest of the paint or ink that was on the gel plate. I left it for 10 more minutes, and there were just some little spots that didn't pull up, but the rest of it did. Now, these inks always look really shiny when I first remove them from the gel plate, but after they dry, they dull back to more of a matte look instead of the glossy finish. Here I'm still trying to understand how I would want to use this gel plate in particular. The layers didn't seem to be working very well. I discovered that you can pull a print with acrylic paint, but it does not all pull up. I also discovered that you can use layers, but they don't turn out as you would expect, and sometimes the layers don't all pull up. So I had an idea, and I thought I would try something different this time. Instead, I pulled a print with just color, no texture. I set that print aside and let it dry. Then I put another layer of some color down. It was in contrasting colors so that they would really stand out. And my idea was to put the textures into this layer and then use that other print to pull up what I have on the plate and to see how that would work for layering. I did leave that stencil on the gel plate so that I would get a very clean impression for this next layer. I probably only left this print to dry for about 2 to 3 minutes. When I pulled up this print, I was amazed. I actually said, wow, because that was not what I was expecting, but I really liked it. And again, you can see the glossiness, and that will fade back and it will become matte once it dries. Now I have another layer here that I can layer one of my previous prints over the top to see how this kind of layering works out. This print did have cool colors already to begin with, so the colors I used over the top, they didn't really pop out like the print that I had done previously. So I really liked how the pop of colors turned out, and on this one I took some warm colors, blended those out, and I thought I would take some fun little flower stencils that I had cut out of my silhouette cameo, and then take this one, which has some kind of warm but mostly cooler tones. And I'm just kind of guessing where I need to lay this because I didn't use any kind of a placement tool when I put this down. And when I removed it, it definitely had a nice contrasting color and it looked really pretty. I liked how this turned out. And there was still quite a bit of ink left on the gel plate. I did add a little texture with my little impression plate here. And I thought I would pull that warm print over this cool colored print. I didn't love it that much. It was okay, but it was starting to feel like it had no purpose. There wasn't any clear image, so I set that one aside to see if I would do something with it later. I put some more fun colors down on the plate and blended them out. Then I used this stencil by Eddie Reyes. Eddie makes art and sold at PM Artist Studio. This one is the vintage floor tiles. I think it's option 1, but I'll put the one that I have in the description. At this point, I was feeling like I was maybe overdoing the layers, but I was still experimenting, so I wanted to keep playing around. This is a tissue paper piece that I was using to remove some of the excess paint or ink. So I put this down to remove all of the rest of the ink on the gel plate. Another thing that I noticed about these inks is that they don't really pull up clean. They leave something behind, kind of like a light ghosting print, but it doesn't pull up like a ghost print really once it dries. So I was just going to keep going, but you can see here the gel plate looks dirtier and dirtier if I don't clean it. I am able to clean this gel plate with the baby oil just like my other ones, and it did come clean, but during this session I could see that the paint was just really building up. This is another stencil from PM Artist Studio. Again, I'll drop this link in the description below. The paper that I'm using to pull most of these prints is the 32-pound hammer mill paper, the copy paper. This did not leave much of an impression, so I just removed that mesh and then I lined it back up again to see if I can get a little more of that black ink. And that did turn out better. And I had this nice amount of ink left, so I used this tissue paper piece to pull the rest of this ink up. I actually really liked how this print turned out, and it ended up being my only tissue paper print. I did bring in my regular gel plate at this point, so since I couldn't get a really good impression of paint on the Speedball gel plate, I wanted to have some nice gold. I didn't really like the gold that the Speedball carries. It looks more like a kind of like a muddy yellow ochre, and it doesn't have a lot of shine to it like this gold does. This is the golden fluid iridescent bright gold. So I thought I would take one of the prints that I had done previously with the Speedball and see if I could layer some acrylic paint over the top. And that did work really nice. I was able to get a nice amount of paint coverage. You can still see a little bit of the detail in the background beneath the gold layer. And then I have another amount of gold left on the plate that I can use over another print. Now I am working with a larger gel plate, the 5x7 versus the Speedball, which is a 4x4. Now, because of the larger size of this gel plate, there is some paint that goes outside of the design, but I'll just cut that off. But now I have the two prints here with a little bit of gold acrylic paint over the top. So you can mix and match if you go from a Speedball gel print to a Gelli Arts gel plate. But if you try to do it the other way around, you can't really. Actually, I didn't try that this time around. Now that I think about it, I wonder if I could take an acrylic painted background and let it dry and then pull this Speedball ink over the top of it. Maybe I'll have to test that next. This print, again, this one did not pull up all the way, but I also did not leave it to dry. So I'm just using tissue paper to remove the rest. Since I was having such a hard time getting the inks to not be blotchy on the gel plate, I decided to brayer them out on my brayer off page and then bring it onto the gel plate. I am layering this over a, it's kind of a blue background. I really liked it because it had nice contrast, but you could barely see the detail in the center of the doily, so I removed the doily and pressed my print right over the top. The only thing I noticed is that that bright contrast in the colors was a little bit lost now that it looked like it was more just that top layer. But again, I am still learning. I'm using another one of those clay textures. And this time I just pulled this one colored print up that has an ombre. I swapped out my warm colors for some cool colors. I layered that print right over the top with this stencil. This is another PM Artist Studio stencil, Dream Big. It's a poem script. And I really like how that turned out. Then I, of course, have the rest of the ink that I just used over another gel print. Now, this was the doily print gel print, and it did get kind of washed away because the colors were too similar. So here I am bringing a bright yellow and the bright green with another stencil. This is by Christy Hartman, Sunflowers. And I'm lining up another print that I had made previously. And again, I really love how the colors pop on this one. So I am definitely really liking the warm versus cool colors layered over each other using the stencils. And then of course some textures are fun too. I did pull those sunflowers over this scripty looking one. I kind of liked it better before, but again, just playing around here. This time I brought in some of that gold from the Speedball ink and then the yellow and the pink. I thought if I removed a lot of the paint in the inside of these designs with a piece of tissue paper, that maybe the remaining print, once I pull up this tissue paper area and the stencil, will look a lot neater. And I was actually really happy with how this turned out. The ombre wasn't too great of a transition where the pink and yellow meet, but I really like how the design turned out on that one. I have more layering that I'm doing here. I really liked how the tissue paper removed some of the paint, and it really doesn't remove all of it. So I was able to kind of repeat this. I don't know, I was starting to learn how to get a repeating pattern going. And for this one, it was interesting because it pulled up a lot of the paint on the top, but it didn't pull up that much on the bottom. So this one turned out quite interesting, and it definitely didn't look cohesive. Next up, I decided, what if I just try one color? So this is the bright pink. Then I layer my stencil, remove the paint with a tissue paper. Take what's left and remove my stencil. And then some of the ink that was on this stencil actually kind of transferred. But then I pulled this print up just by itself, and I thought it was so interesting how the pink looked so different from dark to light. And then there were the white areas, which were really pretty. Next, I put just black down, and I went and did the same process. I really like having black and white prints on hand, so I thought this would be a nice one to try for that. This one turned out a little more black than white, but it does have a really nice texture to it, so I wasn't disappointed with that one. For this one, I wanted to remove more of the paint on the inside, so I used a tissue paper twice. The first impression was very nice, then I used another piece of tissue paper to get even more of the paint to be removed from those in little areas. Then I removed the stencil and layered this over the top of this gel print. I let that layer dry together for about 10 minutes. And I think this one turned out interesting as well. I think it would have been a little more awesome if it had some yellow and orange in it, but I still really like how they turned out. I had a variety. Of course, this one on top is my favorite one. Almost all of my prints were made with the Speedball inks, and let's go through them. This one had the gold with the acrylic. We have the layers with the stencils, again with the acrylic gold, a nice black and white, This one had layers with stencils. This was the tissue paper with 2 layers. Nice bright one solid color. 3 layers on this one. A pretty ombre. And then this one, my favorite, with the, I don't know, the colors just all turned out so magical on this one. It's really hard to repeat a gel print, as you all know. So even with the rest of my experimenting, I didn't get another one quite as close as this first one that caught my eye. So let me know which one was your favorite, and thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. In the meantime, happy crafting, y'all.